We can go ahead and dive in here. Thanks again for joining us for this installment of our webinar series. We're going to talk a bit about the decision between using artificial intelligence or more traditional methods as part of your hiring process. My name is Craig Ellis. I lead the IO psychology team with HighMatch. So really excited to talk with you all today to answer any questions and just go through the material that we have planned. I'm joined by Sarah Eck. She leads our customer success team, and so she's going to present some of the data that we've gathered around the challenges that are being faced by organizations and specifically recruiting teams. So feel free to ask questions throughout. You can raise your hand, drop them in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on them. If I miss them, I promise I'll come back to them at the end. Additionally, and we have a slide to remind me to do this at the end, I'll drop a QR code if you want to schedule some time to chat more deeply about any of the challenges that you're having or have any specific particular questions about any of the content that we go over today. So I'm just really excited to chat with you. I appreciate you all joining, and we'll go ahead and jump in. So Sarah is going to cue us up with some information around the challenges that are being faced by talent acquisition and recruiting teams.
Awesome. Thank you, Craig. Afternoon, everybody. Obviously, my first guest appearance, panicking about the logo being backwards for me. So apologies as you jumped in. But we definitely appreciate you being here and letting me kind of join Craig. So, I support a lot of I lead the support team for the clients that we work with. And we're hearing a lot of the same frustrations out there, right? And that is as we're migrating to this world that is post-COVID and is highly digital, there's this need for automation. And so when we have these teams that don't have any automation, they have talent teams or TA or HR that is just really struggling in their day-to-day, right? So you've got recruiters that are under pressure. So managing multiple requisitions, a lot of those that are getting a ton of applications to them. And we know that out of that kind of sea of applicants, there's going to be a large amount that are a poor fit, right? So we're trying to wade through the group, understand really from an okay resume at best, who's going to be a good fit. And then while we're spending a ton of time just looking at resumes, they're still wanting to do quality interviews and just losing the ability to do so. So when we reach out to our clients, I would grab some stats below, right? But like 61% of recruiters are saying that they're more stressed than they were before just doing their day-to-day. So certainly something that automation can help and what we're looking at. Craig, if you'll go to the next one for us.
Sure.
And then what we look at and kind of where we try to come in and help a lot is the domino effect that you're seeing, right? So you've got overwhelmed recruiters with what we mentioned previously. And when those recruiters are stressed out and they're not able to effectively do their job, right? You've got candidates that are lost in the process who know that you have to get to candidates very quickly. Otherwise, the top candidates are just going to move on to any of the other interview processes for the jobs that they've applied to. It certainly leads to poor quality hires, right? So when you're not able to get the good insights from a quality interview or feeling like you've got to spend the time needed to screen, that means that we're not as confident in those hires going forward. Certainly higher overall turnover is an effect of those poor quality hires, right? When you've got individuals that aren't a good fit, and whether that's their inability to do the job, a misalignment in terms of what they're great at or what they wanted to do, you start to see the turnover off the back of that. And then overall, really a less diverse candidate pool, right? So when you're moving through those resumes real quick and you're just kind of looking for the exact same experience or keywords, you end up with a lot of the same candidates and not something that any of us want. So we know automation can help, right? And that's what's critical in order to get your teams less stressed and more effective. And there's a ton of solutions out there. So, you're looking at a large slew of them here, right? But really what we're trying to understand is what do you need in terms of automation in order to help your recruiters be better? And so when you're looking at all of these, I know a part of what we want to talk about today is kind of how you wade through that group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And I think, as the title sort of speaks to, there's definitely this, conflict that's going on with a lot of recruiting teams and organizations, which is we have this vast candidate pool. We've got limited resources on the recruiting side. And now we've got these tools that promise efficiency without a drop off in quality. And that's where this AI sort of push is coming from. We were at HR Tech a few months ago, and 70 to 80% of the booths and the chats and the marketing materials around AI can help solve your problems. And so AI, isn't evil. It's not inherently bad. Some of these tools are perfectly effective tools, and the research has some documentation around their success. But certainly some of them are also dubious, right? And so we have to be thoughtful and concerned with how do we apply these tools in a way that help us solve the problem of sourcing excellent candidates and ultimately hiring long-term successful employees. So we know that automation is a part of the picture. How do we go about deciding when and where to use it to benefit our process and ultimately the organization as a whole? And so what we know is that automation can help, but isn't the solution in and of itself. Certainly not AI in and of itself. And the example that I always like to draw on here is if you've ever called the customer service line of a cable provider or a wireless internet provider or cell phone provider, and you have a very specific thing that you want to talk about, but you have to wade through the automated answering service, it can be a very frustrating experience. And so they say, enter in your account number, enter in your phone number, and you miskey something or you fat finger something. And so now the data quality isn't good. Okay, go through that process again. And then you listen to the menu and it's like, well, my question isn't really related to any of those things. So now as the consumer, you start to feel frustrated, and it creates a negative experience in a situation that should have been a positive experience and should have reflected very well on the organization that you were calling. And so one of the things that we always talk about is treat your candidates like your customers, right? And so an overly automated process is not a pleasant experience for customers. It's not a super pleasant experience for candidates either. And so what we want to kind of peel back the onion a bit on today is how do you right size your automation strategy? How do you intelligently evaluate each step in your hiring process and then ask the question, is this best handled through an AI automation tool, or is this best handled through a more traditional method like interviews and assessments and questionnaires? And so, our stance on this, whenever we talk to our clients about how to build a right size strategy, we always start with, well, we have to be thoughtful about what information we need, when we're going to gather it, and the tools that we're going to use to gather that information. And if we lay out a very clear plan that's focused on efficiency and candidate experience and quality data, then it creates a more seamless process for your recruiting teams. It creates a faster, more efficient process for your organization and your candidates. And because it's been thoughtfully and meticulously crafted, the candidate doesn't feel like they're sitting on their hands or they're waiting or they're jumping through hoops in order to get to the next stage of the hiring process. And so the first step in being thoughtful about your automation strategy and your hiring strategy is to define the things that are most critical to know about your candidates in order to make an informed, wise hiring decision. And so for us, and again, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about High Match. I don't want this to turn into a sales pitch. We're an assessment company. We believe in building out assessment processes and hiring process that are unique to the organization and unique to the candidate pool and unique to the mission and unique to the problem, right? And so assessments as unique as your organization. And so the mantra that you'll hear us talk about over and over again is that a good hiring process is focused on measuring the things that matter. And so every organization, regardless of industry, regardless of size, has things about them that are unique. And those unique elements of their organization mean that they're looking for unique candidates. And so instead of taking kind of a monolithic one-size-fits-all approach to assessment, which is here's our test, you can use it to identify the best candidates, we work with our clients to determine what are the things that you need to know about your candidates at each stage of the hiring process, and then build an assessment strategy to deliver those insights whenever they're most relevant to them. And so Measure What Matters for us is about matching the content of your evaluation strategy, whether it's interviews or screening questionnaires or personality assessments or situational judgment tests, matching the assessment strategy and the assessment content to what you need to know about your candidates at a given time to move them forward in the process. And so what we always recommend as kind of a best in practice process is to work with assessment experts who can partner with your talent teams and your hiring managers to help you conceptualize and objectively quantify what you need to know about your candidates in order to make a prediction about whether they can be successful in the job or not. And that varies greatly by role, by the way. The things that you need to know in order to predict if a salesperson can be successful are vastly different than the things that you need to know about whether an order selector in a warehouse can be successful. And so certainly the strategies that you use to gather information about those candidates fundamentally should be different. The content of the evaluation assessments or interviews should be different. Where they rest in the process should be different. The unique elements of the candidate pool should inform different strategies. And so the only way to build out a process that is both efficient and objective and creates a positive candidate experience is to combine the expertise of folks who are experts with assessments with the expertise of folks who are experts on your organization and your candidates and your jobs. And so it's this collaborative element that really enables a process that is highly dialed in for your organization and your roles, and creates a process that is pleasant and not overly laborious for your candidates. And so we tend to think about the hiring process as a funnel, right? Where at the earliest stage of the hiring process, candidates are completing an application and really wide net, a high volume of applicants. Oftentimes, the goal at the earliest stage is to hone in focus on the candidates who meet the most basic qualifications, right? And so we think of that as screening. And so are these candidates aligned on pay expectations? Are they aligned on schedule? Can they work the hours that you have laid out for them to work? Can they get to work? Do they have the right experience? Do they understand that this is an in-organization job versus a remote job, right? Their basic alignment, what we would call measures that need to be qualified very early on in the process. And so oftentimes organizations use a recruiter to have a screening conversation with candidates in order to qualify those things. And what we've found is that occupies a hugely inordinate amount of those recruiters' time. They see screening conversations pop up on their calendar, they hop on the phone, they ask the same questions over and over again, they push some folks through based on the same criteria, screen some people out based on the same criteria. What we found is that oftentimes it's more efficient for your recruiters and more pleasant for candidates to ask those questions in the form of a screening questionnaire. This is the pay for this position. Are you comfortable moving forward knowing that this rate is non-negotiable? These are the hours for this position. Are you available to work these hours? This is a full-time position. Are you looking for full-time employment? Right. So have candidates respond to those questions on their phone. When you couldn't see that. It's like an apparition on my screen. Have those candidates respond to those questions on their phone when they're waiting for groceries, when they're picking up their kid in the car line at school, instead of having them have to carve out 30 minutes of their day to give you the most basic information about qualifications. Once we've narrowed that funnel, oftentimes the next question that we need to ask is, out of these candidates who meet the basic qualifications for the position, which of them are likely to be the best fit based on the key competencies and traits and abilities required to perform the position well. And so that's where we often recommend using traditional assessment methods around cognitive ability or behavioral traits or knowledge skills, right? So maybe it's a blend of a measure of basic computer literacy and conscientiousness, or quantitative reasoning ability And if we're talking about sales folks, competitiveness and assertiveness. But ultimately, the goal is to think about, what do I need to know about candidates at this stage in my funnel for me to efficiently and objectively narrow the funnel and focus on the candidates who are most likely to be successful. And a key aspect of that, and I'm going to back up one trait, is partnering with someone who understands best in practice approach to assessments, then partnering with your recruiting teams to lay out your process in a very linear fashion and answer the question, what's the information that we need to gather here in order to effectively narrow our funnel while also maintaining a positive candidate experience? And what we often see is that organizations have a tendency to swing in one direction or the other, which is, we're going to automate the absolute heck out of this process because our recruiters are overwhelmed and we need it to be efficient. And the downside of that is that candidates feel that. They know they're chatting with a chatbot. They know that they're recording an interview on a video and that nobody's there actually watching it. And so the engagement that candidates have in that process is lessened because they recognize that the organization isn't as involved as they are in that process. And so there's a delicate balance to strike efficiency with candidate experience that can really only be achieved through thoughtful partnership with experts who can weigh in on the best way to collect the information that you need to gather and use data around how do candidates respond to those sources of information. Interesting side note about that. Go ahead, Sarah.
You're good. Jump back to the previous slide for 1 second, because I want to hone in on something you're saying. I think, as we partner with a lot of our clients, right, they're coming to us and saying, either I've got a turnover problem, right, or I've got a quality problem. Maybe we're looking to extend retention, or overall, like, I just need to find those that are effectively going to be more productive in the role. And I love this slide here because it certainly is indicative of us, and it's got our name on it. But this approach is really how we coach our clients to think about their process, right? So you're going to go through multiple steps with those candidates where you're engaging with them. And so each of those is a great spot to stop and think about, is this something that I can automate? And if I automate it, is it easier for my recruiters? Is it better for my recruiters? Is it a better experience for the candidates, right? And so Craig used a great example on screen. We love talking to our clients about just that really initial interaction that you're getting, right? I think a lot of candidates apply to a requisition on a job board. We know that they're applying to 10 or 15, right? Because they're also trying to kind of pad their odds on their end. But we kind of take the same approach, right, where we skim quickly through resumes and we're looking, like I mentioned earlier, for those kind of same keywords. And so maybe that's where you look at a resume parser, right? Maybe that's where you insert AI to surface the keywords that you're looking for. So we really encourage our clients, like, take a step back and think about it from each specific step, because there's tons of options that you can implement at each. And then what we also, I think, kind of our unique perspective as well, is to think about the role, right? And that's where I think it's a little bit different in what we're not doing today. We hear a lot of clients who really want to put in place a process that can really go across every role they're hiring for. And there is certainly some benefits to having kind of an overarching process that's similar. But what we might find is, for your entry-level positions, right, that are going to be your hourly employees, maybe there's even some part-time or some contract work. Maybe they're more so right out of college. You want to be thinking mobile first with your automation, right? How do you reach them where they're actually applying and where they live, which is on their phone? Whereas for the executives that you're hiring for your business, right, we know that there's going to be a more in-depth interview process. There's more that you need to know in order to feel confident that they can lead that portion of your business. And so maybe it's not necessarily phone, right? But maybe it's making sure that you've got a third party involved in reaching out to them and connecting to understand their fit for your needs. So it's really this approach of, like, it's kind of a step-by-step down your process, but also really looking at each of the roles that you have and saying, where would a chatbot be beneficial, right? Because maybe with someone right out of college that's very used to that and would prefer to chat with Amazon when something doesn't come in, that's a great fit, and then for other roles that are a little bit more higher level, you take a different approach. So definitely something that I think a lot of our clients have benefited from, and something we ourselves look at every time that we're looking to post for a new role.
Yeah.
I want to touch on that.
And we had a question. Thank you, Sarah. And we had a question come in. What are some signs that a hiring process is too automated or overly automated for candidates? There are two big ones, I think. The first one is candidate throughput or completion rate.
Mm-hmm.
If your completion rate has plummeted and you can't get candidates through the most basic steps of your process, then in many cases, the reason that that's happening is that candidates feel like they're disconnected from the process and they're disconnected from the organization. And so we see this oftentimes when our clients say, well, we want to take this 40-minute assessment and put it right at the beginning of our hiring process, because if people won't complete the assessment, then we don't want to talk to them. And the challenge that we always counsel with our clients on is you're going to wash some really good candidates out of your process because you haven't been thoughtful about their experience. And so oftentimes completion rate is a really good indicator of over automation. The other one is just collecting data on candidate reactions. So giving them the opportunity to weigh in, whether that's through an email or a survey or something that's addended on to the end of one of those initial insight gathering tools, whether it's a screening questionnaire or an interview. But frustrated candidates will tell you that they're frustrated by your process if you give them the opportunity to. And so we always recommend kind of keeping pulse of the candidate experience through your hiring process.
I think on the flip side of that too, sorry if my internet just gave out for a minute. I think on the flip side of that too, we talk to our clients a lot about the length of your hiring. And so when it's not automated enough, right? If your hiring process is over many, many months, right? We also know that you're going to lose those good candidates who are working with a company that's been quicker to get them through each of the steps, continue moving forward, quick to let them, know a yes, you're moving forward, or a no, it's not going to be you this time. So some of our clients will come through and tell us, it's taking us 4 or 5 months to hire for a role. And we're saying that's a great opportunity to find a spot to insert automation, hopefully multiple spots along the way so that you're not losing them because of that extended time as well.
Yeah, so just to kind of, I guess, land the plane on the conversation, really when we think about measuring what matters, it's about thinking about your process and designing an assessment strategy to get the information that you need at the right point in the process. And so that differs by position, it differs by level. And so, just a few examples here. If you're hiring an hourly employee, then the first things that you want to qualify are that they have the minimum qualifications. And, maybe you want to give a job preview so that they can sign off on, yes, this environment is the job that I thought I was signing up for. And so there's a lot of data on the delivery of a job preview early on in the hiring process for positions where the environment is particularly challenging or uncomfortable is an extremely valuable way to narrow your candidate pool and allow candidates to select themselves out of the hiring process at the earliest stage. And so it allows you to be efficient because you're getting out candidates who are going to drop themselves out of the process in week 1 or week 2 on the job. You're getting them out before recruiters ever had to get on the phone or meet them in person. And so it's really about using the appropriate tool at the appropriate point in your hiring process. And so some of those tools might be personality assessments or cognitive ability assessments that are informed by consulting with assessment experts around what do we need to know about our candidates in order to make a prediction. If one of those things is detail orientation, for instance, then we have a lot of data on the best way to measure that. If we know that mathematical reasoning ability is important for an entry-level financial analyst, then there's a lot of research on the best way to measure that and candidate reactions to it. And so, as we talked about earlier, effective automation is about being thoughtful and thinking through when is the best time to measure this thing that we know is important and what's the best method to measure it so that we don't scare candidates off or create a negative candidate experience. Candidate experience is interesting in that a marginal candidate experience has a way of getting out there, like through Glassdoor and word of mouth and Facebook. If candidates don't like your process, they will let everybody else know. In the same way that folks who don't like a restaurant are quick to go on Yelp and let people know the things that they didn't like about that restaurant. And so finding a way to gather the information that you need while still maintaining a positive candidate experience is hypercritical in the environment that we're operating in today. And so in terms of content, hey, we got 4 minutes left. That's all we have. This QR code, if you want to scan it on your phone, will give you the ability to book some time to chat about maybe the problems that you're experiencing or specific roles that you've had a hiring challenge with or automation strategies that you've considered. So would love to talk with you about it more deeply. So you're welcome to grab that code and book some time. Certainly always happy to answer questions now as well. So Sarah and I are going to hang around for a bit and would love to answer any questions that you might have. Just finally, really appreciate you taking the time today to stop by and listen and chat with us for a bit. So really appreciate you attending.
Yeah.
And again, Sarah and I will hang around to answer any questions that you have.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Both take a sip of our.
I know. Parched. Sarah, we had a question, an example of an organization that has gone through this process and how it worked out for them. I know we've got a few of those that we've worked through recently. Is there one that you think would be beneficial to talk through?
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, absolutely. So we, my entire team, right, does this kind of day in and day out, but Craig used an example earlier of a call that you might make to a customer service team. So we worked with a company that is very well known for individuals not wanting to call and get help with, maybe their cable or their phone bill. And where their frustration was is actually the individuals that go out and service those tools that you would use. And so it was this very unique combination of a field technician who is highly technical in nature, but their entire job is to interact with direct customers. And so they needed to strike this fine balance between capable of doing the job, but also capable of maintaining the brand and really connecting with customers to keep them happy. And so we went through this process to understand, from the top, right? Like, so how are you screening out those that are not going to be a good fit, really like their inability to just do the day-to-day of the job, right? That's most important. And then as we continued to understand, once you've narrowed them down, what are we looking at next? And that would be their ability to connect with customers. Okay, let's insert some personality, behavioral assessments there. And so we were able to kind of build this multi-step approach to gathering information at each of the steps where we were really looking to kind of narrow down their candidate pool. And they were able to see a ton of success in terms of identifying those that are going to be a great fit. Really for them too, it was getting individuals to complete the training and show up to the job. So they were looking for that kind of sub 90-day turnover, right? The individuals that were going to last. And I want to say, and forgive me, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I want to say they had a 56 or a 60% increase in those that made it past that 90 days. And when we were looking at the math with them, it was something like a $5 million savings over the year, considering they weren't losing so many people right after the training period, which is obviously costly. So very helpful for them to go through it for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah.
Yeah. I think I saw another question pop up. Craig, did you answer that one?
Someone did ask if we'll share a recording of this after. And yes, we will share it as a follow-up. You'll receive that from us.
Beautiful.
Well, again, thank you all so much. And we'll be sending out the recording of this, as well as the opportunity to book some time to chat with us as a follow-up. So thank you all so much. Really appreciate your time and hope to talk with you soon.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.